I'm Ian from Queensbury, and tonight this morning for you guys, I'm talking to Kristie and Brett Harkness from Manchester. Their studios in Manchester in the UK. How are you guys?
Very well, thank you.
It's my first time interviewing two people, and you're coming across quite well there by the look of it. So, Kristie, you're Canadian, right?
Yes, that's right.
Whereabouts in Canada?
I'm from Saskatchewan, and for those of you who don't know where that is, that's right in the middle of Canada. Prairie province, very cold winters and hot summers.
And a smaller population than New Zealand even, maybe?
Yes, I think there's about 1 million people in the province.
Is that right? Right, okay. So we're four. So, yep, that's a small place. Well, small in population, huge in geography. So you guys met on a cruise ship out of Miami.
We did indeed.
What's it like being a cruise ship photographer? Were you both doing that, or what?
I joined the cruise ships in November '95,
right?
And I was on the ships for about 6.5 years. And Kristie joined. When did you join?
April '99, and I was a professional dancer.
Right.
So I was doing shows. So that was my previous career.
Okay. So
the photographers always employed the dancers because they only worked a couple of nights a week. So we made sure that the dancers were working in the gallery. So
right. Well,
that's how we met.
Yeah, made for each other. But Brett, your background was in the lab industry. Is that right?
Not particularly. No. I worked in the labs on the cruise ships.
Oh, okay. Not as a photographer.
I became a photographer. You start off a photographer, and then when you got up the ranks, you then go to the lab.
Right. So this would have been pre-digital, obviously.
Oh yeah. It was fun. We used to roll our own film back to front. You could quite easily squeeze 90 exposures into a 35mm canister without any trouble. So yeah, we used to print all our own shots. So we'd take them, we'd print them, and we'd sell them the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
So, well, maybe I shouldn't be asking this kind of question, but I wondered if you had any advice for us running a pro lab, or what difference, for that matter, it's made in the process of going digital in the lab industry. Have you got any sort of lessons from that period of time that you're in, or what?
Obviously, things have moved on. I mean, it might be more applicable to ask me about whether I think photographers maybe should print their own stuff, because personally, no. Period.
Right.
Let people know who know what they're doing do it, i.e. you guys and the lab that we use for our prints and the framers, etc., etc. We've got too much to worry about other than trying to calibrate screens at midnight when we run out of ink.
Sure. That's an interesting point of view, and I think it's less of an issue for us, people like us running a lab, than it was a few years ago, where you wondered how far the actual in-studio printing would get to. You'd describe yourself as high-end photographers, right? That would be correct?
Yep.
And how did you get from the cruise ship to where you are today then? That's about how many years since you actually went into the studio?
10 years.
Yeah.
We came off the cruise ship in 2001, and we got married in 2002, and that same year we started our business. I'd say maybe our first proper year in business was 2003, so going into our 8th year.
We came off the ships and we met Catherine. I know you've interviewed her.
Catherine Connor.
Catherine Connor, yeah. And we met her at Focus in Birmingham, and we signed up for the CPT course, which was a fantastic start for us in our business. I don't think the photography was ever a problem. I think it was everything else to do with the business of being a photographer, and that's what we learned pretty quick before we had a chance to make too many mistakes.
Which is where we were introduced to Queensbury. And I think when we first started doing weddings, we did what we thought should be done. 1 picture per page, 2 rolls of film type thing, proof books. And then we found that it just wasn't fulfilling, I guess, Brett's creative thirst to create something that was similar to his travel photography. And when we found the Queensbury albums and turned to digital photography, it was 2 things that married up quite nicely, because we were able to express the story of the day in a way that we wanted, and it was the beginning of our style.
Completely changed, didn't it? Yeah.
When you're saying that the things that you had to learn were the what, the business side of things or the design side of things? Can you be more specific there?
Well, we were pretty fortunate. I don't think I only shot a couple of weddings in this country, £150 a pop, maybe even just one roll of film. That was pretty much it. I'd shot weddings out on the cruise ships in Miami. I used to fake illness on Miami Day just so I could get out of shooting weddings. That was the attitude towards the weddings out there. It was very formulaic. We had a board in the lab where we had our 36 shots on, and those were the shots that you had to get, basically. There was no interpretation from a photographic point of view, because we might have been shooting 3 or 4 weddings on a Miami Day. So that was my interpretation about the wedding industry when we came back to the UK. And through CPT, we learned pretty quick that I could shoot a wedding how I wanted to shoot a wedding, not how I was expected to shoot a wedding. If you looked at my travel imagery and looked at my wedding and social work, it was a different guy altogether. Everything about the business, I wasn't born to be a businessman. I cringe at the thought of selling. All those kind of things, our business structure, our image, how we answer the phone. That's why I don't answer the phone. Yeah, it's not that it's a bad thing. I can speak to people, but certainly Kristie being a Canadian around here, it helps with people's attentiveness to when she speaks to them on the phone.
Really? Why?
Because they don't expect it. I'm not saying you have to go out and get a Canadian, but it helps.
That's okay. So I think it's more than just learning lessons, but if you head off in the wrong direction with your business, like the 150 quid wedding, that in itself is wrong, isn't it? Because you build an expectation around you from the people from the word of mouth that you generate, etc. I think it's harder to recover if you go down the wrong path.
We hadn't gone too far down the slippery slope of disaster. I always say at that time we were doing Jammy Dodger. Are you familiar with Jammy Dodger biscuits?
No.
Well, I'm going to say
them.
But it's
maybe
a
I should
round,
get Kristie to explain them.
It's a round biscuit with jam in the middle, and they're pretty cheap. And I always say at that time in our career, we were doing Jammy Dodger clients, and instead of doing handmade cookies, and which we are now. And I think that's the difference between what we were doing then. So there was no slippery slope of destruction because the clients expected what we were providing at that pricing structure.
I think we made a change at a good time. We did the CPT course, which gave us the business model or recipe and goals to set to where we wanted to be and how to achieve those. So that was really, I think, the beginning for our business. And we've taken that recipe and changed it a bit and done things our way. And I think that's what's made it.
That's very important. You made the point that it's a matter of your creativity, that you're comparing the work that you're doing for weddings, which is formulaic, etc., compared with your travel photography, which is not. But is there more than that to becoming successful at the high end? I reckon that's the key question for our clients. How do you get to the high end? Because our feeling is quite strongly that that's what they're. So if you had one point to make, what would it be? I understand the creativity thing.
I think that it doesn't happen overnight. There's no magic pill that you can take and all of a sudden become a high-end photographer. We've worked our butts off for 8 years to get to where we are. And I think that, and also a really strong, solid belief in what we offer as a business, who we are, and the products that we offer. And we stick by that, and we still stick by that. And I think when we started, we had like these golden rules of our business and what we were willing to deviate from and what we weren't. And I think that kept us on the right track and not, looking too much at what other people are doing and staying true to ourselves and pushing for better and more and different all the time.
And we have a very strong brand, and I think like the Queensberry brand, our brand is very significant to us, and we grow with that. My photography has grown. If you look at my weddings from last year, they're completely different to the way I'm shooting this year. As a photographer, my expectations of what I think I'm capable of change at every single wedding. I bring some other thing in or some other technique, and I try it and I adapt it to my style.
How would you describe your style of photography then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I always let clients explain it to me. When somebody asks me that, one of my clients, I say, well, you tell me what you think. How would you describe it? Yeah, because I think the pictures speak for themselves. And it's like when I was at university and we had to frame our images, and we were marked on the frames that we gave rather than the pictures. And I was like, well, this is crazy. What do you mean? So I used to frame my pictures on newspaper just as an adolescent statement against society. And I was just, I wanted them to look at the pictures. And I think that's what it's like within our business. It's, it's a mix. Our clients get a mixture of social documentary, of fashion, of lighting. It's a whole shebang in one animal, isn't it? It's the whole ball game.
Well, I'm glad that you don't frame them on newsprint anymore. but
well, then the newsprint album.
Well, then maybe there's something in there. But okay, Kristie, let me have a crack at asking you to answer that question. How would you describe Brett's photography? Are you a shooter as well, by the way? I should have asked that.
Very rarely. I mean, I'll second shoot at weddings. I know a lot about photography. I've been to all Brett's courses. But no, Brett is the main shooter on the day, and we don't sell ourselves as a two photography team. We're very much Brett shoots, and I assist on the day. And if I need to second shoot, then I will do. If we need to bring a second shooter, we had a large wedding at the middle of March, and we needed to bring a second shooter, so we brought somebody with us. So it's, it depends, but we're very much, Brett's a photographer, and I'm the woman behind the man.
Right.
Yeah, Kristie does all the hard work, and I just take pictures. That's pretty much it.
Sounds like our relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're obviously saying that your style of photography, and I'll have to get people to go and look at your website, won't I? And then they can make up their own mind about it then. Right?
How would you describe my style? I mean,
very dynamic. I mean, Brett is a brilliant documentary photographer, and I think that comes from his travel photography and just being able to be in a situation and capture what's happening in a very creative way, without too much of what's the word I'm looking for? Interfering too much with what's happening. I'm sure he could probably shoot an entire wedding without even talking, but it's but then we'll take a bit of time, 15 minutes with the couple to do some pose stuff. Whether it's using lighting or using a 50mm 1.2 lens, it's just assessing the situation, assessing the couple and how it works for them. Not everybody, is going to be shot with, flash and really strong movement or a strong look. It depends what works for the couple. We're not just making everybody do the same thing because it's our style, because it might not work for them. I mean, we use this analogy. Last year we did a wedding, back to back, one older couple. It was their second marriage, really relaxed wedding, drinks, canapes out on the lawn. They didn't have an evening reception. They had dinner and then they drove off in the Rolls Royce. So everything was shot on mostly on a 50mm. We didn't pose too much. We did a couple really informal, no flash, really informal shots. Then the second day we did a very big, glamorous marquee wedding in Cheshire, and the couple were young, and the whole wedding eked glamour and sophistication. Right. And so we brought the flashes in for that because we thought it would work for that.
And used some pink bells as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that would have worked for the other couple. So it's really reading people and connecting with them and giving something to them that's true to them, not stamping something on them that they look at and go, you know what, that's just not us.
I have a very strong signature style, not to dwell on my style for much longer, because I can see not enough. But I think it's really important as a photographer, and certainly in the wedding industry, to make a stamp for how you want to be perceived. I don't change my style. I just gauge how much of the client wants it, if that makes sense. So I gauge how much of the client wants that, if I want to give them the whole 9 yards, the flash, the thing, the everything, or do I just go in gently with a 50mm and hide in the bushes, and that's the day. So I think it's important as a photographer to be able to very much keep your style, don't change it, but be able to adapt it.
Right. Let's move on a bit then, and it's not because I'm nodding off. Do you spend a lot of time artworking? Photoshop stuff?
No.
You don't? No, I'm a bit surprised. I thought you would say yes.
No, you'll probably be shocked and horrified as well to know that I shoot JPEG.
I won't tell anyone.
Okay, that's good.
I think the rumor's out.
I think that that's an interesting thing. I can remember a certain person who's reasonably famous saying, "Why not shoot JPEG? As long as you expose it right, there ain't a problem. You know, you've got more flexibility if things go wrong if you're shooting RAW, but shoot a JPEG and shoot it right, and what's the problem?"
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I agree. I don't force that down our students when we do our courses. If they want to shoot RAW, that's fine. Do what they want to do. There's more latitude in a RAW file, of course. But I was brought up on slide film. I was brought up having to get it right at that moment in time. I very rarely look at the back of my camera. I should know that I got the shot in my head, and I endeavour to expose perfectly, and that's what I'm looking for, to cut down the amount of time that I have to sit in front of the computer. Because if I'm sitting in front of the computer, or if Kristie's sitting in front of the computer, we're not making money. There's no business there. We're only making money when we're out taking pictures.
Okay, so then I'm going to get an answer to this that I didn't expect, but do you think that artwork or Photoshop work, whatever, can be a differentiator? How do you feel about it in general? Do you have an attitude to it beyond what?
Yeah, I do. My interpretation of Photoshop is it's a finishing tool, and too much is it used as a tool to create. And where I think the photography should be created already in the camera, it shouldn't be then created afterwards. That's just my personal belief. I am not a fan of all these crazy vintage filters and smoky stuff. I'll sometimes have a play with some of my fashion shots because sometimes it warrants that. Like there was a Gucci campaign recently where they just made all the pictures bright red. You know, sometimes with fashion it can look quite cool.
Sure.
But I think at a wedding, it's about the moment. Gary Fong spoke about this last year in a piece that he wrote, and I truly believe what he said. And he said that it takes away from the moments and the beauty and the realism of a wedding by whacking on all this stuff afterwards and making it something that it was never meant to be. Yeah, I'm a photographer. I'm not a Photoshop expert. I know how to finish my pictures, and that's as far as it goes.
But I think it goes back to on the Queensbury Connect. You wrote an article about trends, and I think it's quite true, because what we want to do is keep the pictures real so they become timeless. And I think that goes hand in hand with the product, the albums that we're presenting our work in. It's timeless. People will look back at that and they won't think, ooh, what were we doing there? Or that looks a bit silly, because it's true, it's real, it's quality, and that's what we want to give our clients.
One more thing, Ian, but it's also important to, all right, it's a finishing tool, but I think it's just as important to finish your style with whatever you use, Lightroom or Photoshop or Aperture or whatever it is. People look at my pictures and they know it's one of mine, not just because of the content, but the way it's been finished. And that's synonymous with our brand, and that's the way we like it.
Well, let me ask another question then. Does that extend to actually framing the image in the camera, or are you happy cropping, or what? How does that work?
I very rarely crop. We only crop if we sell a square. Right. That's pretty much the only time we'll ever crop.
Or if we do a strip in the album.
Right. Yeah. He's very austere then, isn't he? In his approach.
Yes.
I think that's great. I mean, and great discipline. Let me ask another question. Your website has, you mentioned, raised this, your website's got sections for weddings, lifestyle, commercial, fashion, travel. Which of those are most important from a commercial point of view? You mentioned travel earlier on.
Travel isn't. Travel.
Shame.
Yeah, isn't it? Maybe 10 years ago, but not anymore. There are too many photographers everywhere. You don't get sent on assignments anymore. They just call the country and do the assignment there. It's not to say that I will never stop doing it. And I'm doing different things at the moment in the UK. You don't have to get on a plane to create beautiful documentary imagery. My travel is a release for me. It allows me to not have to get dressed up, to not have to put on a show that we do, when we're shooting out in public, as it were. Just allows me to walk the streets wherever I am in my rags and just have a camera and a lens and no flash and just get back to basics.
Right. So from a commercial point of view,
yeah, weddings are I guess because they're plans, in a decent amount of time ahead, you can financially plan your year to see what's coming in, and the rest just filters around that between commercial work, lifestyle work, and the training.
Oh, I guess the lifestyle means that's portraiture, presumably.
Yeah.
Right.